Good morning, and welcome to your morning cereal. Okay, good morning, and welcome to Thursday. Hey, I just wanted to take a moment here just to thank all of you that have been listening and to welcome those of you that are recently joining us. We've seen listener numbers grow on the podcast at a great rate over the last week, so thank you so much for listening. And as you know, the biggest compliment you can do is, well, to follow us, but also tell others about the show that you think might like it. I mean, where else are they going to find out that today is National Chopsticks Day, right? It's also Frozen Yogurt Day and Lame Duck Day and Valentine's Shopping Reminder Day. That's a good one. It's also National Optimist Day and Pay a Compliment Day, and it's also National Time to Talk Day. Now, did you catch all of those? It's a busy day. I guess maybe just pick the one that works best for you in your life and celebrate the heck out of it. I'm going to choose Time to Talk Day. And let's talk about today's quotes. One fun, nostalgic quote, and then a second quote to tease our book review later in the episode. Hopefully, one of these quotes will speak to you and jumpstart your day in a positive direction. Okay, the first quote today comes to us from Guns N' Roses frontman Axl Rose. And he said, quote, "We are made up of two contrasting ideals, love and fear. Pick one and live," end quote. Well, if Axl is demanding that we pick one between love and fear, I guess I'd pick love. Next question. And today's teaser quote from the book review is, "Talk to people about themselves, and they will listen for hours," end quote. As usual, we'll unpack that here in just a minute during the book review segment. But first, let's jump into our usual dose of fun and historic facts from this day in history. Today's news facts and birthdays are for January 6th. Back in 1895, home run hitting baseball player Babe Ruth was born on this date. And in 1911, Ronald Reagan was born on this date as well in Tampico, Illinois. And as a side note, do you find it as odd as I do that these names that we grew up with and were really familiar with, that they were born in 1895 and 1911? I mean, am I really getting that old? Okay, well, moving on, in 1937, the classic novel of Mice and Men was published. In 1945, Jamaican singer and songwriter Bob Marley, he was born. And in 1952, on this date, Queen Elizabeth II, she ascended the throne of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, following the death of her father, King George VI. And back in 2015, she became the longest reigning monarch in British history. And in 1959, the first microchip was patented by Jack Kilby. He was awarded the 2000 Nobel Prize in Physics for his invention. In 1965, the Righteous Brothers' "You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin'" it hit number one on the charts. And in 2014, Jay Leno hosted his last episode of The Tonight Show. He had previously retired, as you recall, in 2009, but he returned the following year. And finally, in 2018, SpaceX's Falcon Heavy rocket had its first test flight. And you might remember seeing the pictures because on board was a Tesla automobile. And happy birthday if today is your birthday. You share a birthday with this man. He will never give you up. Rick Astley. He's dancing into his 59th year. Axl Rose, he's turning 63. And Tom Brokaw, he's 85 today. The number one song on this date in 1988 was "Need You Tonight" by INXS. The song "Need You Tonight" was the song that launched the band into the international spotlight, even though the band had already released 5 albums and were really big in their native country of Australia. Record execs didn't think at the time that the record was in touch with the American audience, but "Need You Tonight" went on to be number one and was followed by their other hits, "Devil Inside" and "New Sensations." And if you recall, the music video for "Need You Tonight" was voted by MTV as number 21 all time. There's no mistaking that hand pointing at the beginning of the video, as well as that guitar riff that starts off the song. Look it up. Well, the number one movie on this date in 1996 was Mr. Holland's Opus. This is a great family movie that I found myself holding back tears when I last watched it. It's based on a true story of Glenn Holland, a composer who became a high school music teacher. And it follows his story that he was going to write the next great symphony piece, and it proceeds to follow Holland's family life, which included his relationship with a deaf son. and it follows his work on his symphony over the arc of his life. I challenge you to watch it without holding back tears. Well, that brings us to the time for some personal growth here in the book review segment of the Morning Serial. As you know, say it along with me, this is where we take a few moments to reflect on the lessons learned from the current book we're reading. And as you know, we're currently reading through Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a timeless book that is consistently in all the must-read lists, and it's packed with rock-solid advice and actions for all of us to use and build healthy foundational concepts to live by. Yesterday, we were still in the meat of Chapter 6 of Part 2, which is entitled How to Make People Like You Instantly. And Carnegie continues to remind us that, quote, the desire to be important is the deepest urge in human nature, end quote. Carnegie is hammering home this philosophy of the golden rule and treating others as you would like to be treated by handing out sincere appreciation, because that, along with some basic good manners, can open countless doors. And we cannot underestimate the power of genuine appreciation and the effect that that can have on someone else's sense of importance. As we near the end of Chapter 6, which again is entitled How to Make Someone Like You Instantly, Carnegie reminds us that all people still need to hear genuine appreciation. And even people like George Eastman, he was the inventor of Kodak film, who was worth hundreds of millions of dollars even back when this book was written. So even Eastman craved for these little recognitions. As Carnegie tells the story, Eastman was building the Eastman School of Music. Flashback to Carnegie's comments on people putting their names on libraries and such for fear that their names be forgotten from history. And don't get me wrong, I'd put my name on a library if I could afford to build one too. But as the story goes, the architect of a new building brought a tradesman, Mr. Adamson, to Eastman, who wanted to secure the order for the theater chairs of the new music school. When the meeting with Eastman had arrived, the architect told Mr. Adamson to be quick about it. If you waste more than 5 minutes of Eastman's time, you won't stand a chance. Quote, so tell your story quickly and get out, end quote. And Adamson was prepared to do just that. But as he was waiting to meet Eastman, he admired just how beautiful the woodwork was in Eastman's office. And as he met Eastman, he commented on just that. Quote, I've been admiring your office. I'm in the interior woodworking business, and I've never saw a more beautiful office in all my life, end quote. And Eastman replied, quote, you remind me of something I had almost forgotten. It is beautiful, isn't it? End quote. And Eastman and Adamson began a discussion on how Eastman was so busy he forgot to slow down and enjoy the beauty of the office, of the intricate woodwork. And they discussed the rare woods that had been used in the office and how Eastman had been so involved in the planning of the office. And as they walked around the office, they paused before a window discussing the way Eastman was using his wealth to help humanity build a number of hospitals and universities. And at one point, Eastman showed Adamson the first camera that he ever owned. And Adamson continued to inquire about the struggles Eastman had early on when starting the business. Eastman talked about growing up in poverty, which terrified him day and night and pushed him to his success, to make sure his mother didn't have to work the multiple jobs that she did. Adamson drew more and more out of Eastman and with genuine interest in his story, and Eastman continued with stories about starting the business and his early experiments inventing them. Well, Adamson's 5 minutes had turned into 2 hours, and Eastman invited him to his home to look at some chairs he had purchased in Japan. Long story long, Adamson not only won the order, but Eastman and Adamson became close friends. And Adamson, taking genuine interest in Eastman's office, not even taking interest, at least initially, in Eastman himself, was the catalyst that opened the door for this opportunity. The final short story of the chapter is about a restaurant owner who received a letter of resignation from a key employee. An employee he thought he had treated very fairly, and in fact, they were good friends. So perhaps the owner thought to himself that he had taken her a bit for granted. Well, the owner told her that he could not accept her letter of resignation as, quote, you mean a great deal to me and to this company, and you are as important to the success of this restaurant as I am, end quote. He repeated this in front of the entire staff, and then he proceeded to invite her to his home and repeated it in front of his entire family. That employee ended up withdrawing her resignation, and she became an even more reliable employee than before. The owner then more often reinforced this by expressing his appreciation for her and her importance to the restaurant, which in turn made her feel important and made her more devoted to his restaurant. Carnegie closes with a quote from Disraeli, one of the shrewdest men who ever ruled the British Empire, who said, quote, "Talk to people about themselves. Talk to people about themselves and they will listen for hours," end quote. That one's a bit of a thinker, but it is unabashedly true. Okay, here it is. Carnegie's principle number 6 in a chapter entitled How to Make People Like You Instantly. Principle number 6 is make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. Well, that brings us to the close of part 2, which was entitled 6 Ways to Make People Like You. And here are the 6 ways that Carnegie has outlined. Number 1, become genuinely interested in other people. Number 2, smile. Number 3, remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. Number 4, be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Number 5, talk in terms of the other person's interests. And number 6 today, make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. The real beauty of these principles, if utilized in everyday life, is how it will open up your heart and your soul. It feels good to be this type of person, to this kind of person, this thoughtful of a person who can make others genuinely feel important. And it's a win-win for everyone. So feed your soul today by using Carnegie's principles and prepare yourself, for tomorrow we'll begin part 3 of How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is entitled How to Win People to Your Way of Thinking. And Carnegie throws us straight into the deep end with chapter 1 called You Can't Win an Argument. So don't argue with me. Come back tomorrow for the start of part 3. Given today is National Optimist Day, I think it's going to be a fantastic day. Go out there and meet the obstacles head on. And don't forget, there's only one way to eat an elephant, and that's one bite at a time. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you back here tomorrow, and have a fantastic day. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Morning Serial podcast on the One Life Live It channel. You can find more episodes and videos by visiting our YouTube channel and the website at Sean Inglis and at SeanInglis.com, where you can also follow our other podcasts, the Mr. and Mrs. Inglis podcast and the Life Happens podcast. In these other podcasts, we'll dive deeper into everyday issues, self-improvement and well-being, business and finance, and we welcome special guests too. So join us. It'll be a good time, I promise. Thanks again for listening. Have a fantastic day, and we'll see you tomorrow.